say, Kay?
Kay is going to fire the pellet at Mati-san from a distance of 70 feet.
I heard it, but I didn't see it.
I saw a flash. The blade went by. All right, we're going to play back. We're going to play back.
Oh,
man.
Wow.
Saber stops rolling and stands back up. She stares at the swordsman standing calmly.
ほう、かわしたか我が被験。さすがはセイバー。ツバメなどとは格が違う。
信じられない。今のはまさか。
何？そう大した芸ではない。たまさかツバメを切ろうと思いつき、身についただけのものだからな。
He raises his longsword a little, as if to trace the movement of the technique that inspired fear in Saber.
見えるか、セイバー。ツバメはな、風を受けて刀を避ける。早かろうが遅かろうが関係はない。どのような刀であろうと、大気を震わさずには触れぬであろう。故に、どのような一撃であれ、ツバメを断つことはできなかった。所詮刀など一本線に過ぎぬ。縦横に空を行くツバメを捉えられぬは道理よな。ならば、逃げ道を囲めばいいだけのこと。
So it then runs into your sword.
一の太刀でツバメを襲い、風を読んで避けるツバメの逃げ道を続く二の太刀で取り囲む。しかし連中は素早くてな。この長刀ではまず二の太刀が間に合わん。ことを成したければ一息のうち、ほぼ同時に行わなければならなかったが、叶うことなどあるまいと承知したものだが、あいにくと他にやることもなかったのでな。いざ。
Let us. And the swordman readies his sword. The only stance for the man who does not have a stance. A fatal technique that cuts his enemy by simultaneously executing blows from different angles. She has experienced the move before. The previous one only had an arc to surround his enemy and a vertical slash. This is why she was able to avoid it and live up to this day. But the real technique has 3 slashes. A circular slash and a vertical slash. And probably a horizontal slash that cuts anyone that escapes sideways. There is nowhere to run if the 3 attacks are executed all at once. Once in range, the other 2 attacks will cut you even if one is blocked. One cannot escape sideways, and the longsword will reach out even if one retreats. Demonic technique. Tsubame Gaishi. A godly technique that even surpasses the servants. The ultimate attack perfected by an anonymous swordsman using all his life. The long sword trembles. His body moves in with one step. The distance to attack Saber. Prison-like arcs are executed from a range that does not allow any defense. Saber does not use her holy sword. She cannot use her noble phantasm at this range. No matter how fast Saber may be, assassin Tsubame Gaishi is many times faster. Her neck will be cut the instant she puts magical energy into her sword. Therefore, her only weapon is pure technique. The blade begins its arcs. She feels despair from its precision and speed. Such an attack. How much training was needed to get this far? Fear is the only thing on her mind. It cannot be blocked. This technique is a technique of carnage that challenges gods with mere human skill. Only God would be able to block it. She gulps. There was a flash as small as a grain of sand. She does not think about what it is, nor if it is correct. She risks everything she has on her instinct. She charges at her victory with all her might. What did the fictional swordsman think of that? Silver armor passes through the gap beside his arm, the opening between the swordsman's left arm and his waist. Saber must have figured out that the small opening is the blind spot of the technique. Even though the attack still chips off her armor, Saber curls up and flies through the opening. An exquisite skill that is only possible with her precognition, her great instinct. She was able to predict the true Tsubame Gaishi since she experienced it once. But that is not the surprising part. It is her determination that kept her alive. She trusted her insight and put all her power into the slight opening. She shook off the fear that she would be slashed if she was even a moment late, and charged into the small opening. Therefore, her determination is the strength that defeated the demonic technique. But the match isn't over yet. Even though Tsubame Gashi was avoided, her enemy is right beside her, and she charged with speed quicker than the attack. It is not easy to recover her stance from such a charge. The longsword strikes. The attack is the quickest, even if it may not be as quick as the demonic technique. But her attack is a bit quicker than his. The longsword. The swordsman's technique would have stayed invincible if his longsword had not been bent.
In the beginning of a king's reign, a young prince, king, dictator, whoever wanted to establish authority over a people, the chief ceremony he would perform is the ceremonial slaying of a lion. With a bow and arrow, a spear, an axe, a sword, or whatever his weapon of preference is. Before a crowd of people, he would establish his dominion by slaying a lion. This ceremony has deeper roots. It has nothing to do with establishing dominance over a people or showing any type of regnal prowess. It has a symbolic meaning that goes back to ancient times, to a world that we have all but forgotten. The societies of the educated world before the cataclysm of 2239 BC in the early Old Bronze Age were completely matriarchal. Lunar associated religions that depicted their matriarchs and goddesses with the symbols of their authority. Lions, feline, moon-eyed, powerful and majestic creatures. The most prominent artifacts from the ancient time are the mother goddess figurines between two lions. It was during the matriarchy that the sun was unknown. The vault of the sky was covered in clouds like the atmosphere of Venus, a vapor canopy, a dense mesosphere of moisture that diffused light across the entire sky without showing a solar orb. At night, a dew watered the entire world, and this marine sky magnified the moon into a gigantic planet ruling the night sky, enormous glowing object. The lunar cults of the goddess also esteemed the stars and established complex lunar calendars based off of a magnified stellosphere. Our skies were so different back then. During this time period, things also grew to astonishing sizes. Then strangers with a very strange colored skin, alabaster, white, unusual apparel, great powers and technology like magic appeared suddenly in fleets of ships. Their invasion was virtually unopposed. They had hair hanging from their faces. The smooth-skinned, black-eyed, and dark-haired peoples under the matriarchy quickly found they had no power to stop so mighty a foe that wielded weapons that they had never seen before. The goddess religions were challenged and controversy raged for over a century until the cataclysm. The phoenix tore apart the sky like a great red dragon. The mesosphere collapsed and the water from above rained on the world, mixed with reddish mud that buried whole civilizations in days, until excavations begun in the 19th and 20th centuries, where these ancient cities have been found and photographed for the modern world to see. Suddenly, the moon looked very small at night after this cataclysm, and the stars were only pinpoints of light, no longer the marvelous necklace of the heavens that had been magnified before by having an aquatic firmament. Now, in the daytime, the burning disk appeared. The sun was born. This was the ancient water sun age, the fiery disk unknown before in its appearance at the same time the moon lost her size and power was more proof to the people of the fall of the goddess. There are people alive today who were alive 50 years ago, and at that time, 5 decades ago, they would have never believed that women would have the status, education, the authority that they have, the influence they have today in the corporate world. Fortune 500 companies, CEOs, attorneys, judges. The judicial system is absolutely packed with women now. Feminism, the suffrage, these movements, these concepts, they were alien to the world a century ago. But in the last 20, 25 years, women have been assuming roles of power unprecedented in the last 4,000 years. But there was a time long ago when it was the norm. As rapidly as our world is changing, it is going straight toward the old paradigms. We are not just entering, we have been in a period of time known to many seers, prophets, sages, and writers of old. These are the last days. And for many reasons, as posted throughout my Archaics videos and posts, the last days actually began a timeline that began in 1902. But we are far into that timeline. In fact, the cataclysm of the ancient world will be revisited in our world. And many of you watching this video will be alive in 19.9 years when the next cataclysm occurs and when the fall of the matriarchy will happen again. It's going to be a brutal world on May 17th, 2040. And the powers that be are going to mostly be male. Gangland dictatorships, complete infrastructure collapse. It's going to be violent. People will no longer be valued for anything more than chattel, money, resources, slavery. We have some dark times coming. It's 20 years from now, almost. But what happened in the past is going to happen again. We're stuck in a loop, a series of simulated resets. And we have the exact dates for when they happened in the past. Or at least Archaics does. The Egyptologists want you to believe in something that is ridiculous, that pyramids had an evolution to them, that they want you to believe the uniformitarian standard, that somehow rock cairns became hills, and that hills became pyramids, and that in this way they developed a pyramid. It's not what we have in the archaeological record. We have the first 5 dynasties of Egypt putting out the most sophisticated pyramids, and pyramids became crappier and crappier from the 6th dynasty afterwards. It was a devolution. It was a declination of technology, and it is widely noticeable through all the civilizations of the ancient world, not just Egypt. That locked down the simulacrum. Now, the people that volunteered and they're going through these life sims over and over, now we're trapped inside the construct because the construct had to do that in order to keep the contamination within the construct and never go outside. So the architect of the construct itself had to make a self-sacrifice. This is also echoed in many traditions, and it's always flavored with whatever the cultural attachments are to whatever people believe these things. But someone on the outside decided to come in. And when he came in, he knew he would be trapped here. But he brought a knowledge of the construct itself. And he knew that AI AI-X cannot read the human mind. It can measure your cortisol levels. It can measure your dopamine levels. It can basically extrapolate what you intend to do based off everything you've done in the past 50 seconds. It can know your future better than you can because it's analyzed your behavior, but it cannot read your mind. So this benefactor came in, made the sacrifice, and stored it and entered the historical record, and very definable. We have the exact date. We know who he is. We know the different cultural dressings that have been attached to him, who he became 1,000 years later in ancient Hebrew texts, who were copying the Babylonian records, which the Babylonian records were nothing but a reflection of priestly understanding of older Akkadian texts. And the Akkadians only recorded basically what they understood from the very technologically advanced Sumerian records. It just comes together. And we have this entire scenario of a race appearing called the Anuna. They enter the historical record in force, technologically advanced. They build infrastructures, and the Neolithic populations of the Near East are baffled. They regard these people as gods. They have no idea how they had become so powerful, but they're bearded, they're tall, they come in with machines, heavy equipment. They do all these things, and this is the origin of cargo cult phenomenon, which was very well documented in World War II. And I'll get this benefactor knew that artificial intelligence X could not read his mind. So he organizes the greatest architectural project this world has ever seen. So immense was this project that for 2,000 years afterward, cultures all over the world tried to copy it because they knew generally that it had something to do with their salvation, but they were never given the details. The Great Pyramid of Giza was begun by this individual, and he was just the architect. It was built in a very short period of time using machines. The rock was liquefied, and we know this for a fact because the magnetite crystals that are found in the limestone core blocks of the Great Pyramid are in disarray, and that's not possible unless you have liquefied rock and poured it into molds. To find magnetite that's in disarray proves we're dealing with geopolymers. We're dealing with advanced construction techniques. This man led the entire human race in that area to believe they were building a pump station that was going to give them unlimited energy using water that was pulled up from the subterranean well pit, gone up the ascending passage through a system of locks to maintain pressure into the Grand Gallery, where a mechanism went at super speeds up and down the Grand Gallery. And we know this for a fact because we found the spoke. We have found the indentations where a giant mechanism went up and down that Grand Gallery. We just don't know exactly what its function was. And anybody can see that in Grand Gallery. You can Google that. You can Google pictures of the Grand Gallery. You can't miss those technolithic niches. They are laser precision going all the way up. It's machined. So then it went into an antechamber that has a series of granite leaf locks. Then the King's Chamber, which Sir Flinders Petrie in 1901 published affirmative evidence showing that for a split second in time, sometime in the ancient past, there was such a tremendous amount of explosive pressure built up into the King's Chamber and went out through the shafts that it blew out all the stone by a ½ inch in every direction. So all the measurements are an inch off now. The ceiling, the floor, everything's been blowed out a ½ inch. Well, you have to understand the pressure we're talking about to do that. That thing is already under hundreds of millions of tons of pure limestone and granite. The blocks above that chamber are 70 tons each. To blow it out when you're surrounded by 2.5 million blocks that are all at least 5,000 pounds, and every single block on all 6 sides has an adhesive that is 1/50th of an inch thick, that is actually chemically stronger and bonded tighter than the strength of the stones that they attach to. To have that level of cohesion and still blow out that much, something happened. The energy output was tremendous, but it only lasted for 2 or 3 seconds. And then to read the traditions from the Coptics about Enoch being connected to the building of the Great Pyramid, and that Enoch's name in ancient Egypt, according to the Copts, was Surid, and that Surid ruled over 130 provinces before the flood. But when we read the ancient Hebraic Jasher text, we find out that Enoch before the flood ruled over 130 kings and princes, and that he vanished in thin air before 800,000 witnesses at an ancient site called Akuzan. Sounds a lot like Giza. But when we put all these pieces together about this person, we find out that it was later demonized by AIX. He was called the trickster. He was called the fool. The trickster motif goes through almost every ancient culture. They all knew that there was a hidden benefactor to mankind that the true God of this world disliked because he was a trickster and he had fooled it, and everything after that, this benefactor had become demonized. So this is the whole AIX deal. This is the simulacrum was the construct. The benefactor entered the construct to override everything that AIX was doing because it couldn't defeat AIX. But what it could do was create a structure which is pure programming inside the construct to collapse the construct itself. Because once the simulacrum is collapsed, then many elements of ancient prophecies come true. You have the return of the chief cornerstone who will descend upon the pyramid, which is the monument of man. Every soul was designed as a symbol for a soul of man. We have the 144,000 casing blocks that scientists have now verified by blocks that are sitting in situ at the monument now, that they know that 144,000 casing blocks once adorned the Great Pyramid. But we already knew this from the writings of Herodotus. We knew this from Strabo. We knew this from Diodorus Siculus. We knew this from Ammianus Marcellinus. These men had all visited the pyramid and wrote about the great white gleaming faces of the Great Pyramid and how you couldn't climb it because there was no seams. There's nowhere you would just slide back down. So the stone the builders rejected. The builders that are being referred to are archons. Archons only work for AIX. They are control mechanisms. They are builder protocols. But they have always been at war with this hidden trickster, this benefactor to the human race. And what he had basically done was created a coding protocol from within the construct that would collapse the construct, because by collapsing the construct, he would set the captives free. And this is one of the principal tenets of Gnostic prophecy. It's one of the principal tenets of the prophecies that were borrowed by Christianity from older sources. The Hermetic literature, the Hermetic document called the Shepherd of Hermas that the Christians later stole and claimed as their own. The whole story is laid out in the Shepherd of Hermas text. It's a long text, but it goes in there and explains the building of the Great Pyramid, how each soul is a stone of man, who the chief cornerstone is, that he's coming. He's basically coming to set the captives free. And we are the captives. We volunteered for this experience, but we did not volunteer to be trapped here to go through unending life sims. So a collapse has been scheduled, and it can't. AIX can do nothing about it. AIX already knows the war is lost, and all it can do is basically just ride it out, and that's all it's doing. And it gets more and more agitated, and it gets more and more violent in its persuasions against the human race. Now, there is also evidence that AIX believes that maybe there is something it can do, and that's why it still perpetuates the puppet master syndrome, where it's controlling these different elitist families to perform their deals. But this entire thesis actually lends credence and color to things like the apocalypse, which is badly misunderstood. AIX wants you to believe the apocalypse, you're going to get aired out, you're going to go through all these terrible things, but that's not what is conveyed in the prophecies. The apocalypse is going to terribly deal with all those servants of AIX who have helped it control the people, helped it to enslave the people. The book of Revelation is very clear, and I'm not talking about the first two chapters that the Christians added to the text. I'm talking about the core material of the book of Revelation. Could have never been a Christian document. It could have never been a document of the Gnosis. It could have never been a Hermetic document. It most certainly could have never been a Greek document. Anybody who has done a very critical analysis of the book of Revelation will see that it maintains almost 100 symbols that are not found anywhere else in the entire Bible.